Welcome, everyone, to our Hindsight 2020, Insight 2021 panel of restaurant industry leaders. I am Stacy Gilbert, a partner and the co-practice leader of the restaurant and hospitality practice at Citrin Cooperman. I'm excited to present restaurant association leaders that represent hundreds of hospitality businesses that will share their thoughts, their struggles, experiences, and insights to the past as well as into the future. This is going to be a great event, lots to talk about, so let's begin. Panelists, want to show your faces? So I'll have each panelist tell us who they are and a little something about themselves. So since you're outnumbered, I'm going to say men first. Andrew, would you like to start?
I am outnumbered. Yes, hello, great to be here. I'm Andrew Ridgey. I'm the executive director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Always great to see everyone and do a Citrin event. Thanks for everything all of you and your team have been doing. Basically, the Hospitality Alliance is a not-for-profit association that represents restaurants and nightlife establishments in the 5 boroughs. And we, like my friends on this Zoom, have been going around the clock for almost the past year, really fighting for the future of our collective industry. So leave it at that and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Andrew. Melissa?
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Flyshoot. I'm president and CEO at the New York State Restaurant Association. Similar relationship as Andrew here in New York, except we cover the entire state. We have fun saying, we represent from Brooklyn to Buffalo and from Montauk to Messina. So if you know where those are, then you know all about New York State. I've been CEO at the association since 2013, and I've been with the New York State Restaurant Association since 1999. So
Wow.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much, Stacy.
Thank you. Mary Lou?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lou Halverson. I'm president and CEO of the New Jersey Restaurant and Hospitality Association. We represent restaurants, hotels, amusements, very broad-based an association. And like Andrew said, the last year has been quite challenging for our members. And I want to thank Stacy and Bob, who does a lot of work in New Jersey, for all their support, not just to the association, but our members. And looking forward to answering your questions today. So thank you.
Thank you. And Dale?
Hi, I'm Dale Venturini. I'm president of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. And again, we represent the entire industry. I am 32 years in my job. Never saw a pandemic before now, and I hope that I will never see one again. I'm interested in this conversation just as much as all of you are, even though I do work with my counterparts on a regular basis. And the nice part about who we are is we're not in competition with each other usually. So we share a lot of stuff together. So what may work in New Jersey, I can adjust and make it work in Rhode Island, same goes New York. So that's the fun part about what we do. It's a hard word to say fun for the last 11 months, but we're doing the best we can. So I'm looking forward to talking with everyone today.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, let's get started. Andrew, we'll start with you. So New York City has been especially restricted by legislators, and it has been difficult to make progress. But how significant is the role of government, and what has the Alliance been able to do in terms of legislation to help move the industry forward?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question because in so many ways, I think if you speak with restaurateurs, government has been part of the problem, but at the same time, government has to be part of the solution. So it's like these two things just tugging at each other. Clearly in the middle of a pandemic, you need the government there to help organize response to the pandemic and implement policies or solutions to mitigate and eventually eliminate it and bring public health and our economy back from the brink. but at the same time, those policies often make it more and more difficult for businesses to operate. Now, I think some of them are completely understandable. Others, we may, question their impact or why they're even in effect in the first place. So I think with that said, you need government really at all levels to enact counter policies that are going to help offset a lot of the burdens that not only the pandemic itself brings, but so many of those regulations that are put in place during the pandemic force. So, we've worked with an amazing, coalition of different business groups, Melissa and the State Association, the chambers, obviously our businesses, from the beginning, putting the law in place here in the city that suspends enforcement of personal liability guarantees and leases, the eviction moratorium at the state level, rolling out the outdoor dining program, which, more than about 11,000 restaurants have been participating in. I mean, that's tremendous. Clearly, it was never intended to help save the industry, but it's really helped. Still, it's only about 40% of the total eating and drinking establishments that are enrolled, even though there's 11,000 of them. And then depending on where you're located, depends on how beneficial the outdoor dining can be. If you're on a street and an avenue, you can get more seating on the roadside and in the sidewalk versus if you're in the middle of the block and have a very, narrow facade, because that determines how much space you can have. We've got changes where, while I know the inspections can be, very, very frustrating, most of the city ones now, they're coming with a warning first, which is something we had been saying pre-pandemic. Why are you just issuing violations and fines for every little, minor violation? You should really focus on inspector coming out saying, this is a violation. This is why it's a violation. This is how you correct it. And then if they return at a later date and it hasn't been fixed, at that point, you would only then be fined. So there's certainly, policies like that. The PPP, again, that's something we've all dealt with. There were some changes made to it early on in the first round that allowed greater percentage to go to rent. The newer round, obviously 3.5 times payroll versus 2.5, working towards the Restaurants Act. So I don't necessarily think it's just city government. I think every level of government, because they play such a deep role in the operations of the hospitality industry, they all have a role. They all have a responsibility. And I would state they have a bigger responsibility than ever to provide support, particularly because so many of their restrictions have created even more and more challenges for businesses. And if we're going to come out on the other side of this pandemic eventually, which we eventually will as an industry, how many policies are they going to be able to enact so as many existing restaurants and hospitality businesses that were existing throughout the pandemic will make it to the other side?
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I mean, without the government, they just wouldn't have survived. So all the help has been needed and continues to be needed. Does anyone else want to add to that? Okay, I guess Andrew summarized that well. Mary Lou, let's go to you. Were there any specific challenges that made a bad situation even worse? And if so, how did the New Jersey Restaurant and Hospitality Association handle that? And were you able to make any progress?
Thank you. Yeah, there were a few specific challenges. One was kind of affected all of our counterparts. The big one was the misconception about the safety of dining in restaurants. And early on, we were challenged with the study from Wuhan, China that talked about, all the contracting COVID in a restaurant, when we've seen now through contact tracing and data collecting that actually dining with our high sanitation protocols is safer than the indoor gatherings, where we're seeing that that's where the spread is coming from. So that has been from March to now. I think the education that we've all had to do in our own states and cities, educating our elected officials as to we're the safe alternative for celebrating going out to dinner. So that was a really big challenge, and that was real specific, but it did affect all of us. The one thing in New Jersey that was really terrible was we were ready to do indoor dining. The governor had announced in June that we were going to start indoor dining. at 25%. And 3 days before, he pulled back. And so all of our, our entire industry had prepared, brought in food, trained their staff for the new sanitation protocols, put in, implemented a lot of expensive infrastructure. So then all of a sudden have the wool pulled out from underneath them, I mean, literally, and costing them so much money that they did not have. And that was, I think, very specific to our state. And that was probably, I'm sure for the people that operate in New Jersey can tell you how detrimental and devastating that was for them. We worked on getting legislation passed that would allow them to recoup some of those losses. The governor vetoed that bill, but in the end, we did get grant money for businesses that wasn't specific to this. And then I would think the other thing specific to New Jersey, our challenges is, we're a really small state, but we have 563 municipalities. So when the governor's EOs came out, how each town is interpreting, whether it's Department of Health or the alcohol beverage control, and each town is, so we have operators that, are being, inspected by 3 or 4 different entities. And they could, if they have a restaurant in, say, Bergen County and one in Monmouth County, they could be operating under so many different guidelines. So trying to navigate and get answers for them has been difficult.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. Melissa, New York State and New York City are not always under the same regulations. So has that worked in your favor, or has that made your job more difficult? And alternatively, how has the city and the state worked together, and what impact has that had?
Yeah, so I love this question, but I would definitely say that this has made the job that much harder. We've seen throughout the entire pandemic, most of the rules for New York City, probably from June on, were completely different than the rest of the state. And while we had great success getting things open in upstate and getting outdoor dining going, the promise of indoor dining in New York City took months. And it's been a real challenge for us to try to navigate that. Obviously, New York City operators don't feel that that's fair when, somebody can go across the border to Long Island or Westchester or even New Jersey and, have a different experience. And it seems so interconnected. It's been really a challenge for us to try and address the separate needs that they have while still advocating for our upstate members. So even this last 2 months or so have been really interesting because we try to balance what we're asking for. And, upstate wanted orange zones gone. So when the orange zone microcluster restrictions were lifted, that was good for upstate, but it had no impact on New York City. So getting New York City indoor dining open has to be its own effort and its own initiative. And not, it doesn't have anything to do with really the upstate policies or where we are with the upstate policies. So it's constantly this balancing act of trying to address everybody's needs when they're so different. And all of them really have to go back to the governor's office, the governor's staff, and his executive orders. So you're working with this one group of people on multiple initiatives for multiple areas of the business and then multiple areas of the state. And I would say it's definitely complicated it. How do the city and the state work together? Well, from the city government and the state government standpoint, I will tell you, that's always a challenge. It was a challenge pre-pandemic. It's a challenge during the pandemic. It'll probably be a challenge post-pandemic. We'll have to see what happens with a new mayor. But that's been an incredible struggle. I think there's times when Andrew and I have both been able to find ways to navigate that. The challenges of the city government and the state government working together are not the same as the alliance and the association working together, luckily. But it's been difficult dealing with the mayor who has constantly talked about not wanting to open indoor dining. It changes rapidly. One day he'll say, no, we can't open indoor dining. And then 2 days later, he'll say, yes, we can, even though, everybody then reminds him that it's not his decision anyway. So it's been a real challenge, but, there's times when you can certainly work with the governor's office and deal with the governor's office, since that's his level of jurisdiction, and he likes to remind everyone of that. And then deal with the city government on some of the other things that Andrew was talking about, in terms of delivery cap fees and some of the personal guarantees on commercial rent. So, you know, there's things we can do at every level of government, but their working together has certainly been a challenge.
Yeah, to your point, I had a conversation with someone in the Bronx who said, you know, they've been, you know, going to restaurants in Westchester County. And there's a worry there that those local businesses might have lost recurring customers, you know, because now they found a new home to go. Andrew, I'm sure you'd like to add to what Melissa has said.
Sure. I mean, yeah, Melissa's spot on. It's been really tough. And then I think just trying to understand exactly how specific decisions are being made, when they're being made. You know, there's a lot of challenges, and now more recently, it started to change a little bit. But, you know, there are areas in New York City where the infection and hospitalization rates were a lot lower than they were in other places of the state that were still open. And I know even within the state, there were restrictions of areas where within one county, an area was restricted, yet it had lower rates than in other areas of a county. So I think one of the challenges has just been the uncertainty of all of this, is that people are really desperately just trying to keep their business afloat. They're trying to keep people employed. And it's so difficult when we're nearly a year into this pandemic. And I guess maybe there's an end in sight, but not for a long time, because you can't really plan. You know, if you don't know when you're going to be able to open up indoors, you may not know whether or not you should even keep exhausting your personal savings to try to keep the restaurant open. So I think that has been a challenge, is the uncertainty, and I think on some issues, the lack of either guidance or insight of what will happen in the future. I mean, the good news is now we're on a good path. We all seem to be working in the same direction. So I want to kind of continue that. On Friday, we'll increase in New York City from 25% occupancy to 35% occupancy. We hear from most operators they need at least 50%. That's not going to keep them going for that long, but it at least is an area where they can have a little bit of hope and get a little bit more money into the business. But then there's issues neighborhood to neighborhood. I mean, if you're in Midtown or Lower Manhattan and the office buildings are less than 10% occupied, what are you going to do? If you rely on tourism, and, you know, we have no idea when the nearly 70 million annual tourists are going to come back to the city in New York, that's a problem. If you rely on pre and post Broadway business, like, I don't know when theater's coming back, maybe next year. So there's all of these other outstanding things that create more uncertainty. And that's why we really need support from government to keep us going as long as possible to get onto the other side of this without completely, well, I should say, getting onto the other side of this, but also supporting us enough so when we do get onto the other side of this, we have a fighting chance to keep going permanently, not just, you know, like, oh, we're here, and then we're just going to close shortly thereafter.
Right. Thanks, Andrew. Dale, you said on our call when we first spoke, I'm not going to let this crisis go to waste. And that comment meant something to me. What has been the biggest win for you in Rhode Island since the beginning of this? And what has been something that you were able to accomplish that was difficult to do even before the pandemic?
You know, I don't know if something was difficult. Is our jobs have always been so robust and ever changing because we work for a very vibrant industry. So I think the difficult part was just taking the time to regroup. And I would say the biggest win is gathering lots of different organizations that were unrelated to us, number one, and start to work together, general public included, where they started to miss our industry and realize how important it was to the community. And the government started to realize, because we track the meals tax. You know, there's a sales tax, a meals tax, and of course on the hotel, you've got the lodging tax. And we started tracking that and making comparisons and doing a lot of social media about that and getting spokespeople and putting hotels up in front, because they're pretty much empty as well, unless they're being used for, you know, some of the colleges or the like. So the interesting part about what I saw is, first of all, we were working 7 days a week and continued to, and I don't know how anybody can keep that pace up. It's been almost a year. As they all said, we need predictability. So it was constantly working with the governor's office. In our case, our legislature went home because they closed the State House. So I worked now with the executive branch, which is normally I work with the executive branch, but I work with the legislature more than the executive branch. Now it was literally executive branch every day, taking phone calls from morning till night, sometimes in the middle of the night, because they were working in shifts. So I didn't want to have them make a decision in the middle of the night that I would have to unravel the next day. So it was always being available to them for expertise, for negotiating, for bouncing ideas off of. We were able to very successfully get a lot of grants for our industry. In some cases, the hotels got up to $1 million. We're small, remember, small state. Mary Lou, you can't say small state. I am the tiniest here. But being a small state, we were able to get a lot more done. I'm listening to Andrew and Melissa going, I don't have those issues with separate issues for each county. Everything was done. It was done for the state. But having more voices at the table having their perspectives heard was very, very interesting for us. And that's why I say not waste the crisis. All of a sudden, the Manufacturers Association, wait a minute, I've got PPE, I've got masks and everything else. We had people pouring in to donate to us. The hard part was the distribution. We don't have the availability for distribution. I put in a bunch of those big giant storage containers, but it wasn't enough, so that we had to constantly being remaking ourselves and figuring out and being very fluid and just not being able to say no, figuring something out that was different. So it was finding all of these partners. It was unbelievable. We have the manufacturers gave us PPE, and then Thursday at our regular industry meeting, something that we used to do, but not every week. Now we have big attendance at our industry meetings every Thursday, is this week, the CPA Society for Rhode Island is co-sponsoring that with us, because we were finding we were getting questions from CPAs about issues relating to the hospitality industry. And we said, wait a minute, we're seeing a trend here. Let's get together and answer these questions together. So that part was really beautiful. One of the most fun things that came out of this, like I said, fun is a hard word to say during this pandemic, but we did this amazing campaign called BYO Blanket, Bring Your Own Blanket. And it went crazy in our state. We were able to get 12,000 blankets through a grant. We were able to put stickers on them. They were these big fluffy, I wish I had one to show you, big fluffy fun blankets. And we distributed those along with hand warmers and outdoor heaters. So that was hard. We took over a Marriott, who the chairman of my board this year is a hotelier from the Providence Marriott. We literally commandeered one of his big banquet rooms and for 10 days and did a distribution program. Not normally what we're into. Good news is I used to be in distribution. So we put a big distribution plate. And I'll tell you, the biggest reward was people coming to us and saying, thank you. Thank you for having something that we can look forward to. Thank you for including our customers. And then we did this little campaign. We'll take your photo using your blanket and tell us your story. And we gave out gift cards for that. But it made us more creative. And that was fun, because most of our job is working with government, working with legislature, working with regulatory agencies. And this time it got us out of our own comfort zone and box to do even bigger things.
It's always nice when you can find some positive out of something so negative. So that's good to hear. Anyone want to add to what Dale has said, or shall we move on?
I just think, going back to what you just first said, mentioned with Dale, it's the old Winston Churchill quote, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And I think that pre-pandemic, our industry was facing so many challenges. So how do we use the political momentum, so to speak, to get some of these changes and make them permanent? Because eventually the industry will come back. So how do we use this to fix some of the, long existing challenges. And I think things like outdoor dining are one of those policies that you don't let a good crisis go to waste. We saw how helpful it was for restaurants here in the city. We saw how it really helped transform our streets and bring back a vitality and an energy to the streets. And I think that was so important. What I said before with the fines, we've been talking about cure periods and warnings for minor violations for years now. And it looks like now we're starting to get momentum and it's actually working. And you can get through compliance through education and training. But then there's also temporary policies that we have, like the cap on third-party delivery fees, which Melissa mentioned, which are so important. And how do we use this to make sure that we get those permanent? Because right now they're temporary. So I think that's a good opportunity. And I think building these relationships as well with other people, doing so many Zooms, you can meet with so many more people on Zoom than you could in person. And you really start to learn what other folks are doing, what's working, what's not working, and really kind of share ideas. And I think if we can all continue this more collective advocacy into the future, we can continue to get a lot more done on the other side of this.
Thanks, Andrew. So we're still on the political end, I guess. So Mary Lou, do you feel that the legislators have understood the plight of the industry and have been sympathetic to the industry? How much did you need in terms of awareness to educate the legislators?
I think early on it was just everybody was in shell shock. But slowly they began to become real aware of how it was impacting their districts, because there are restaurants and hotels in every legislative district, in every congressional district. So they started hearing pretty quickly, not just from the association, but from their restaurants and hotels in their town and the employees. And then, so it was, the impact became evident real quick. Problem was the legislature didn't have any real jurisdiction in the beginning. Everything was done through executive order. And to Dale's point, I think we all just were dealing with the governor's office and the Department of Health on so many things. So really the legislature was sidelined. They were extremely sympathetic. And, we did roundtables, I think, with leadership on both sides. And I think I spoke to probably every single member of the New Jersey legislature. But really up until maybe September, there wasn't a lot for them to do because everything was being done through the governor's office. And then I think they started to understand that they needed to kind of maybe take some of their power back and do things. And we got things like cocktails to go. That was early on. That was back in June. We got cocktails to go, expansion of liquor license, with outdoor dining, and a lot of other really, positive things that helped our restaurants expand their operating and footprint. And the local municipalities were really helpful. And, so we had a town like Red Bank who just basically created this really cute Italian kind of palazzo theme downtown area. And so Freehold, there was a lot of towns that really were being helpful. And because they did start to see those out of business signs, and especially at the Jersey Shore, in the summer, did take a hit. So, I think that we need to take this and, like, back to Dale's point about a good crisis, you don't let a good crisis go to waste, or Andrew made that point, was, we do roundtables where we'll bring in members of the legislature and we'll meet with our either congressional delegation or our state delegation, legislators in every district, and we bring members in and have this discussion. And we've been doing that, and we've really ramped that up. We have 9,000 key advocates in the state of New Jersey right now. And those are people who have directly connected to an elected official in the state of New Jersey during this pandemic. And so we need to make sure that we continue to grow that program. And believe me, it's not in New Jersey. I know Dale, she might say she's the smallest, but I'd like to know, when you talk to Carrie, I want to watch that fight between the two of you. Is it Delaware or Rhode Island? But whether you're, Rhode Island or California or New York or New Jersey or Wyoming or Florida, we have all really have a great opportunity to take the influence and the sympathy, quite honestly, that we have right now, and make sure that we stay connected to decision makers at every level, and make sure that and the one thing is that our members have become much more comfortable talking to the media and talking to legislators. They know what to say now, where before they might have been a little hesitant. I don't want to testify. Now they're out there because they know right now they're fighting for their business and they're fighting for their life. So I think that those are some of the positive things, and that relationship with the legislature is key.
Yeah, I completely agree. Anyone want to add to that? Okay, Andrew, the industry has stretched very far, and I don't know when it's coming back. I certainly don't know if it's coming back to the way that it was. So what do you think the possibility for the future of the industry is? What do we need to look like to get where we need to be?
Well, I kind of indicated it before, I have no doubt that the industry is going to come back. I mean, I think eating, drinking, socializing, it's just in the DNA of humans and kind of in the DNA of cities and towns. So it'll definitely come back. And because people have been cooped up in lockdowns and in their little family pods or whatnot, I think they're going to be craving more than ever to go out and be together and eat good meals and go out dancing and drinking. So, people keep saying it's going to be like a restaurant renaissance and a new roaring 20s. And I'm sure all that's going to be true. I think the real question goes back to how are we going to get as many of the small businesses that had to exist throughout this pandemic to the other side and really give them a chance of survival. And that's going to come down to the policies. And again, so much is uncertain, but I think if we can get through the next, look, we're, almost in March already. If we can get to a little bit warmer weather, we get the outdoor dining open, we can get that 35%, which starts Friday, up to 50%, continue to increase it. More people get vaccinated. This is definitely a little bit more New York City centric, but we can get people back to their offices. I think that's going to be a big outstanding question, is how are these companies going to bring people back? Like your firm, for example, are people going to eventually, if they're working 100% at home now, are they going to be doing a hybrid model? Is that hybrid model going to be 2 days in the office or 3 days in the office and the rest at home? Are people going to feel comfortable coming back to New York City? So there's a lot to be said. And I think part of it's going to be, and I was happy to see that yesterday the mayor announced that there's going to be a recovery czar, is how are we going to bring back people to New York City? And I think it's going to be partially also how do these businesses adapt? It's hard to tell exactly what people are going to want. I think generally people are going to want two things. They're going to want to be together with people and have a meal, a good meal in an environment where they can socialize and they can talk and they can catch up, because they're going to have so much to talk about in person. And then I think people are also going to want to go out and just like party and let loose and dance, like be together. So I think those two types of concepts will probably, continue to, go back to working. But it's going to be a tough, long road. And I think now really the focus is not like exactly are they going to come back, but how are we going to save as many of the places that exist right now? But there are policies, in the governor's proposed budget, the ability to issue temporary liquor licenses in New York City, which currently is now prohibited, could allow restaurants and new bars to open up much faster and not have to go through 5-6+ months to get a liquor license, which basically results in people just turning down deals these days. So, it's a combination of saving these places and then also bring people back to the city, creating excitement and enthusiasm. Why are they going to come back into Midtown Manhattan? Why are they going to go out to, to restaurants and everything? So some is just organic and will happen, but, we're going to need policies to bring people back.
Yeah, yes, Dale.
Well, I agree with all of that. And one of the things that we have been very concerned about is our workforce. We're finding that our workforce doesn't want to come back, and they're nervous because of the constant ever-changing landscape of, we've been very fortunate that we have we're open at 50%. We started at 66. We went for a short period of time down to 25 and then went back right back up to 33, excuse me, and then back up to 50. But it's ever changing, and there's not a lot of predictability right now. So I just saw in the Wall Street Journal this morning that workers are abandoning their careers in hospitality and they're finding other types of jobs. We've done an all-out effort of training and in letting the customer know, that we're doing a lot more training so that they're feeling more comfortable. But I do believe there's a pent-up demand. My concern is are we going to be able to fulfill it? Because if we don't have the staff in place, somebody's going to come back and they're not going to have the same experience that they had in their minds. So it's really, really critical that there's so many pieces to this puzzle that we can't leave one out at this point in time. We have to have every piece ready to go when the people have this desire and need and want to get back out again, to whether it's be travel, dine, or any activity that they've been held back from.
That's a good point. Yeah, we've also heard a lot of people have called back employees and they're like, oh no, they weren't from New York originally. So like, I'm back in North Carolina. And it's like, oh, and I think that's going to be, depending on where you're located, particularly in, cities, a big challenge. So what are cities going to do to attract those people back? And I think part of that's going to depend on what they're doing to attract just the general, workforce back and companies back, and going back to the point of working in person versus virtual. So.
Dale, that touches on the next question that I was actually going to ask, which has to do with increasing consumer confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a difficult thing to accomplish. What are your thoughts on how we can do that? And that's not an easy plight for certainly an association to do, or for anyone for that matter. Have you given that any thought?
Probably every waking moment. It is on our minds. When someone says, what do I miss the most? I never realized what I missed is the cacophony of noises. Maybe they aggravated me before, but now I can't wait to hear the clinking of glasses, the conversation, the whatever you can think of in a restaurant, the sizzle of the steak. Consumer confidence is a big deal because sometimes people have been talking about, even at 50% or when we were at 66% with the spacing and everything else, they still weren't full because there are still a group of people that just don't feel comfortable, particularly eating inside. We are working on a campaign right now. Thank you for bringing it up. In an association, it's not our role. We're not normally in the marketing business, and most of us don't have that kind of funding because it does take and require a lot. So we have been talking with our CVBs and Convention and Visitors Bureau and tourism regions to just keep them focused. We're about to kick off a social media campaign with very limited funding, I will say, and creativity from our team. Also using our national partners because they come back to us with some design work that we can then use for our local and put it in. We've been very lucky about grants, and like I said earlier, we're doing a lot of training, a lot of food safety training. I never thought I'd see the day that people wanted to see somebody cleaning their table. So seeing cleaning. To me, going out to dine was not about the, it was the little mystery. You knew that was all happening in the back. It always has been. We're the most regulated industry around. But now people are watching it. They want to know. They want to see it happen. By the way, that's one of the things I hope goes away, because after a while, I'm not sure, I have to clean my own house. I don't want to watch other people cleaning. I want to know that it's happening. The interesting part about, as we were having these conversations with regard to consumer confidence, the industry in itself has been creating this consumer confidence because of what they did, even though they were shut down, hurting, not sure if they were going to pay their bills, going on hibernation for a couple of months. They were still feeding the first responders. They were still providing all sorts of, even cash, like gift certificates, food, space. They were doing volunteering. There was so much give back that was brought to the forefront in many, many cases. The press picked up on it a lot, asking, well, wait a minute, you don't even have, your restaurant open. Or when we would get, when Mary Lou said earlier about, she had 2 days open, closed. what did they have to do with the food? They didn't throw that food away. They donated everything, I'm sure. You know, they went around and fed everyone they could, homeless, wherever they could give up their time and effort. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about our industry that's going to help us through consumer confidence. The other thing, and it was mentioned earlier, is getting our members a little more comfortable in the press. Oh, I don't want to talk to the press. Now they're getting a little bit more comfortable. And part of our campaign is using our members, starting with our board, to just say something, tell us something from your heart that we're going to turn around into some kind of a campaign in a very structured way. And we're just working on this right now with very little or no funding. It's also keeping the community involved. We have, and I think several of us have, an employee relief fund that has taken off, and it's still going. We started it earlier through a grant through United Way to fund it. And then unfortunately, one of our beloved board members died unexpectedly, and his company contributed a substantial amount of money. And then all of a sudden money started flowing in. So we started giving out small grants. They're only $250 to employees of the industry. And we thought once we were done with the original amount of money we had raised, it would be over. It's ongoing. This holiday season, we were getting checks from the public, $600 check. I got a $600 check from the government. I'd rather donate it. Then I can get by because I'm not going out. I'm not doing a lot of things. So I'd rather donate it to you. These things, I heard from people I went to high school with, and honestly was like, I don't remember them. Oh my goodness. And my staff would call them, and when they would make a donation on our website, and call them and say, are you interested? Where are you? Are you related to the industry? And they go, no, tell Dale I said hi. I went to high school with her. I'm not telling you how many years ago that was. That was like, are you kidding me? The people, the generosity, I kept saying this such a generosity of the soul out there right now. And as much as COVID has created some opportunity, it has created some opportunists, right? And every once in a while they can steal from us and take away our day and to pay attention to some negative. When you know that you can help an employee just with a little bit of money, maybe make the next week's, help wait the next week's rent or get groceries or those kinds of things, that tells a story. And I will say, we're learning to tell our stories a lot better. All of us on this call are all storytellers. It's what we do. We lobby, so we tell stories. But this is now getting other people telling stories for us on our behalf and telling us how much they miss the restaurant, just sharing, a lot of sharing. And it is heartfelt. And I'm hoping that it continues. And I'll let you know how we make out on our little campaign with no money. And I'm hoping we just file for a grant to get a little bit of money to do some more like paid advertisement type stuff. But if that doesn't happen, we're still going to move forward in the program that we're working on right now.
If I can.
Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, no, I want to just kind of double down on what Dale said. Consumer confidence is going to be the biggest thing. And we've been telling everybody since day one how safe our restaurants are, and your clients, right, who are our members. We know what we do with sanitation. I mean, I venture to say that probably most restaurants are cleaner than some doctor's offices. So we just have to make sure that the public knows that. And, we have the industry promise, which is, so restaurants need to really make sure that they're telling the story about their own cleanliness. Whether we have a decal that we're putting out, with our safe dining kind of seal of approval. We have our checklist. Restaurants need to use the resources from all of our associations and from the National Restaurant Association to really promote and get people comfortable. And, I know we all hate social media, but I remember when outdoor dining, first happened, were people going to go and sit down at a table with each other? And they didn't. But then they started seeing pictures of other people doing it. And then that just kind of grew. So then slowly, organically it grew. And then, okay, indoor dining. Oh, are you going to sit at a table even, with other people inside? And then you saw pictures of other people doing it. And then so it's going to happen. It's going to happen slowly. But whatever our restaurants and we can do collectively to show the sanitation protocols, to show the cleanly policies, what all of our members do will help to instill that confidence. And I just doubled down on what I wanted to say about ambassadors. It's not just the restaurant owners that have been helping to tell our stories. And that's, what Dale said was 100%. Our employees have become in lockstep with us, and because it has affected them, and they are just such great partners and great storytellers as well, because they have a story to tell. It's different than ours, but it's very impactful. And we've been really working with the employees to be, using them to talk about some of the issues. And because many times we're, on the same page on certain legislative issues with them.
Thanks, Mary Lynn. Dale, thank you for mentioning, the acts of kindness. All too often we forget to mention those things, and I too saw an unbelievable amount, and we need to talk about that more and more these days in particular. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, you know what? I have a lot more questions, but I also want to make sure that we also get to some of the questions that some of our audience are asking. So I'll go back to some of my questions as soon as we ask what some other people would like to hear from you. So there's a question about the increase in the proposed minimum wage. And does this affect the tip credit? Anyone want to respond to that?
I'll just tell you, yes, it does. And the tip credit is very much in jeopardy of being eliminated. I don't know, in some states they already have eliminated the tip credit, but this is where our employees are going to be very important in being storytellers, because servers and bartenders do not like the elimination of the tip wage. They are very concerned about that, because they don't want to because we know they're making far more than $12 or $15 an hour. So I know our association has been very, very not instrumental, but very, very active in reaching out to both Senator Booker and Senator Menendez. Senator Menendez has said that he does not support elimination of the tip wage. He supports the increase in the minimum wage. So, but to that question is yes, it is on the table and it's in risk.
Okay, we also have a question. What do you think the operators that created GoFundMe campaigns to support their staff? I'm getting mixed reviews from the industry. Anyone have a response on that? Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the beginning, I think everyone, was panicking in the beginning, and they were trying to figure out what they could do. And a lot of people set up these GoFundMe campaigns really just to get money to help distribute it, with not perhaps thinking through all the logistics and how it work. I know some people did a really good job of that. Others may not have. So I definitely think for any restaurateurs that put them together and are involved with the management, they should definitely make sure that they're managing the money and the distribution and all the questions about all that, how that all happens properly, perhaps even seeking advice of counsel on it. I know other restaurateurs help promote them, but the funds are actually set up and managed by the employees themselves. Perhaps that reduces some of the liability from the employer perspective, but clearly then, employees are relying on each other for the fair and equitable distribution and management, which can be an issue. So, I mean, I think it kind of fits into the bin of so many other things that have been going on through this pandemic. These are all unprecedented circumstances, and everyone's trying to do things on the fly most of the time, I'd say, with very good intent, but they just need to be careful and think things through. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but I know they've helped a lot of people, but I'm also not surprised that there's some, mixed reviews.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that is the question. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, I think I'll try and get this done so that we can let our attendees go on time. So I'm going to ask a question of all of you, and feel free if you want to respond to this, but I'm curious to know what was going on within your various associations during the initial panic. And how did you manage the hundreds of inquiries coming at you from people who needed help, who might have been telling you what you should be doing, and of course you needing to be proactive and basically on the front line in this particular case? I can only imagine what was going on in your respective offices. So whoever wants to start, I'd just be curious to get some insight.
I can start and tell you it wasn't hundreds, it was thousands, and they were coming fast and furious in an industry that works late. You want to call me at 5:30 in the morning, I'm in, but you know, when the calls start coming at 10 o'clock at night or 11, it gets very hard. So we started tracking them. Remember, we're all small organizations. I bet you every one of us could use 5 more employees to get even that much more work done. First of all, we had to lay off, just like every other business had to lay off, but yet we were needed more than ever. And that challenge was beyond. Thinking about that, we have not added back staff, but we've added up double the work. And I don't know to what degree we can continue. However, what we did is we started tracking the questions and, put a grid together so that no matter who took the question, we would have it there so we could develop something called frequently asked questions, which seems like a no-brainer. But what I did learn is our associations are used to giving concierge service. So you call us, you get treated, we take care of you. And even though we work for the industry, we're not an I, it's not about we work for whatever the whole industry wants. It was very hard to let our clients know that, first of all, they needed to put stuff in writing to us, because sometimes we got half of the question and then we'd answer it and then it really wasn't what they needed, or they said, well, hospitality told me to do it this way, when in fact that was not the truth. So we put in process, everything has to be in writing. And also that we tracked them. Luckily for us, we had Michael Crowley from Citrin in Providence sits on the Convention Center Authority with me. And when we were in a little bit of a crisis and I needed help, I called him. He gave us Jen Hogenkamp, who we used as a consultant for, particularly PPP and the like, because as best we were trying to answer questions, it was just too much. We tracked over. This is when we started tracking, probably a week later, at the first PPP, when we all became educated on it with our Small Business Administration, we tracked over 1,600 inquiries. And these were inquiries that probably we didn't know at the time, because PPP was so new. We didn't know, we should have just put those off to, the CPAs here on the calls. But, we didn't want to let our clients go. We're fortunate we have an attorney on staff, so she became very proficient in all of this, and the webinars and fast and furious. But I hope that all of this, our members see the value in what we have brought to the table on all of this. This was the place to go. And the only other thing I'll say of something else about some of those calls were so heartbreaking and so heart-wrenching that we had to put together some mental health services at the very beginning in April and May, and worked with the state. And now, we're lucky enough to work with United Health and some of our nationals, but mental health services were critical because people just needed someone to talk to. And even our own Mary Lou is the past president of the Council of State Restaurant Associations, and under her leadership, she put some services for us to have as leaders of the association. By the way, we all thought, we don't need any of this stuff. What are you kidding me, right? And then I'm on a call with this one woman, and I still have a piece of paper here. One thing I took away from it, that big thing I took away from it, was just draw a line in the middle of a piece of paper and put your name and then put your work name. And I found out that under me, there was nothing there on most days. It was all over on that other column. And it was very, very eye-opening. Very simple, right? But it was, through Mary Lou's leadership that, I was thinking, I'm not going to get on this call. I was grateful. So we did it. And then we offered it to our staff. So I mandated my staff to go on those calls through the Council of State Restaurant Associations. So this speaks to how we all work together and figure all of this out. And we call each other sometimes because, nobody knows better. We can speak shorthand to each other. We all know what we're experiencing. We don't have to say too much.
Yeah, it takes a village, doesn't it?
It does.
Melissa?
So for us, we're in the same boat as everybody else. It was completely overwhelming, the amount of calls, the amount of emails that were coming in. Everybody was trying to get questions asked and answered. So one of the ideas, and I believe it came out of one of our chapters actually, was to hold an operator Zoom call. So we started holding operator Zoom calls, and we were kind of doing them regionally at first. And we would have, any member, non-member who wanted to join the call. And then if we had a question get asked, everybody could hear the answer. So we were sharing information, how's your PPP loan going? Where are you finding success? What are you having trouble with? And discussions around that were happening operator to operator. So it was a way for them to continue networking, even though they were shut down, and, they had this wealth of time that they'd never had before on their hands. And it provided us, I think, an opportunity to maybe get fewer phone calls, fewer emails, because they were on these Zoom calls, asking their own questions and talking to each other about best practices. So I think that was one of the things that really helped us. We started doing nightly email updates, which we're still doing 5 nights a week, every night, a daily update on anything new that's happened at the national, state, or local level in our state, as well as a list of our webinars with our partners like you, Stacy, and, giving them information about our calls. I know at the end of January, we'd done over 170 operator Zoom calls. So as exhausting as that might sound, it has been one way for us to stay really well connected in a big state with people that we wouldn't be able to see, wouldn't be able to talk to or get to, and just give them that, cathartic moment, really, that they weren't alone, that they weren't going through this alone, that there was a group of people out there, whether it was peer-to-peer or the association to the operator, and that we were all going to figure out a way to get through this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to talk a few people off the ledge myself. Mary Lou?
Yeah, I mean, just the same. I feel like we almost became part-time therapists, right? Listening to our members. And I think they just, they weren't calling about ServSafe, or they weren't calling. I think sometimes they just wanted to talk to you. And we are in the hospitality business. And so we're very much used to that personal connection. So it wasn't, to Dale's point, right? We do talk to our members. They all have our cell phone numbers. They, calls whenever they want. And in normal times, that's great. But, it was very challenging and emotionally for not just myself, but I remember being on a 50-state call and seeing my peers around the country with tears in their eyes, not just for themselves, but for their employees that they had to let go, or their members. And, and the pace was a lot, but, it's a great industry and we have great members. And, fortunately, we've had some spike in membership numbers. We know that though we're going to lose a lot of members because people are going to go out. So it's just it's been an emotional time. But I have to say, I could not have gotten through it if I did not have people like Dale or Melissa to just, I called Dale for a couple months ago for 5 minutes, and it ended up being into a 45-minute therapy session. I just needed someone to talk to, and she was there.
That's great. I do want to read one thing that just came up on the Q&A. The New York State Restaurant Association operator calls literally kept me sane and continue to do so. The best things Melissa could have done for us. So isn't it nice? I had to read that. Well,
and that's what keeps us going, right? Hearing that
absolutely.
from a member, or not, even a non-member, just knowing that we were able to be there for somebody and help them through this, that's, that makes it worthwhile.
Makes it all worthwhile. Andrew, you wanted to close it out?
Yeah, I just agree. It's same as above with, Dale, Melissa, and Mary Lou. Early on, it was just out for us, just being absolutely as aggressive as possible. Things were changing. So how could we just get as much information from as many different sources as possible and put it out as quick as possible and ensure that it was accurate and it wasn't just going to confuse people even more. And I think part of it was also just kind of being assertive with certain members and people in the industry, saying, we know this is scary. We know this is crazy. We know there's no answers right now, and there probably is not going to be for a little while. So keep just reading what we're sending out. Do everything to the best of your ability, and we all will have to get through this somehow together, because there just was not answers. And I think part of that was because everyone can connect to the restaurant and the hospitality industry, was also keeping it out front and center in the press, making sure that our industry story was front and center, making sure that in any political conversations, regulatory conversations, our industry was front and center. And again, making sure to get information out to people timely, making sure it's accurate, and making sure that you're just being responsive. And I think just what all three, or I guess four of you said as well, it really was kind of just being a support system and a therapist for people, and just letting them know that there are organizations like all of ours there on the front lines that are fighting for them and trying to provide guidance, and they're not alone. There's a lot of other people going through this, and we're stronger together than separate. So we'll continue that theme throughout.
Yeah, I want to say all of us have been servicing the entire industry. It's not about membership right now and hasn't been for 11 months. And so at some point, we've got to figure that out. And we're all talking about that, about what does our model look like? Not only what does the restaurant community look like, what does the hotel community like, but what is the model of associations going to look like? So that is something that, is an incubation for all of us to start thinking about, because how do we stop now? We do a daily brief. First it was 7 days a week, now it's 5, and we tried to go lower and people requested it. But what happens when, at some point we've got to figure out what to do on non-members, but with any email we can find, intern calling and finding emails, we've just been servicing probably 5 or 6 times on normal membership.
Well, this has been fabulous, I will say. And so we're at 12:02. So I'm going to say, on behalf of all that have struggled to navigate through this crazy and difficult time, I'd like to thank all of you for what you do. And right now, I would like to thank you for spending time with us and sharing your thoughts. And anytime that Citrin Cooperman can help, please let us know. We certainly get a lot of pleasure in partnering with all of you and helping the industry and helping our clients. So, anything that we can do for those that have attended and for all of you, we are here to support you. And thank you so much again, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.